Welcome back to my channel. My name is Doug, and back with another fountain pen related video. Today we're going to look at some PenBBS 456 repair. This is my PenBBS 456. I love this pen. While I was preparing for a previous video on the 355 that I received from a viewer, I picked this pen up and subsequently dropped it. I didn't drop it far, I didn't drop it hard, but it cracked nonetheless. And it broke right there. It actually cracked straight off of the threads. So that's where the damage was. This whole top section came off, a little bit of crack there, and then straight off. So this piece was off. I got some crazy glue and glued it back together again. It's very rough right there and sort of etched the inside of the barrel. I was worried that it might leak, and I filled it up with ink, and it didn't leak, but it looks ugly nonetheless. And then, in conversation with a viewer, he suggested that I get in touch with Bainey on Etsy and ask whether I could buy just the barrel. So that's what I did, and she included it with a previous order. I just got in my PenBBS 323, which I just reviewed, and in that package she sold me just the body. And it was quite reasonable with no shipping, because I paid the shipping on the 323. It was just $8 US. So, how to repair? Well, it's just this simple. We're going to take the section off, just like that. We're going to open up the blind cap, and we're going to draw back the piston just a bit. And there's a little flatted section right there that you can put your wrench on. My trusty, rusty crescent wrench. Just make sure you have it on the flat part so you don't wreck the threads. And just give it a small turn, and then the rest you can do with your fingers. There we go. The piston comes out, and there you have the body. Chuck that away. Here's the new body. Put that together just with your finger tight, and just very lightly. Again, no pressure here at all. Turn it with the hand, not the wrench, just to snug it. Doesn't need to be super tight. Sounds like there's a nice seal there. Nice vacuum. Yep. Put the section back on. Of course, I always add a little bit of silicone grease. You can add it to the piston in here as well, but it's sliding fairly nicely, so I don't really need to do that. This is just to keep ink from splashing out past that gasket. There we go. Little dab will do ya. Screw that back on. And we're ready to go. Let's see if it lines up. Almost. Might have to line up that nib again. And we're ready to fill. So I thought I'd take some time while I've not got my new repaired 456 to do a comparison between the PenBBS 355 and the PenBBS 456. You can take a look at their caps and their shapes and their filling mechanisms. One thing that's interesting is that Both of the caps are different in terms of their finials. We've got a picture of this. One is a bit chunkier than the other, and one is got a trapezoid kind of a shape to it. Both the clips are the same, but also what's interesting is the tolerance between the top of the cap inside and the nib. On the 456 there's quite a bit of tolerance, where on the 355 there's very little. Now let's look at the two nibs. Again, I have a close-up picture of this. I'll get this to focus. There we go. The 355 on the right is gold with silver accent, and the 456 on the left is silver with gold accent. They're both exactly the same nib in terms of their features. They're both the mini Fude nibs and interchangeable with each other. Now let's look at the sections. Again, I've got a photo of this. The two sections, they're almost, if not completely, identical. The 456 has a more gradual flare towards the nib, whereas the 355 steps up a little bit more dramatically. And of course, the difference back here with the threads is that the 456 has metal threads and the 355 has the resin threads. Then when we look at the bodies, the body of the 355 is rather cylindrical. It tapers down just a bit towards the end, but it is very much a cylindrical tube, whereas the 456 is much more tapered because it comes down to a thinner tail section. When we look at the end of each one of these pens, the 355 has a much squarer look, and it has more weight to it as well, whereas the 456 has this tapered cap. And when you look at the mechanics, take the blind cap off, unscrew it, and there is a metal threading on the 456 and plastic on the 355. Of course, the filling systems are slightly different. The 456 is a vacuum filler, and so you pull the plunger back, you put your nib in the ink, you push the plunger down, which creates negative pressure back here, and then it pops out. The seal pops out right there, releasing this vacuum which sucks ink up through. Now some people will also turn this the other way around and get all the ink down towards the bottom. Pull this back down again through, turn it back down into your ink, and do the plunge again to get a maximum fill. On the 355, it is what they call a bulk filler, and I talked about this in my review of the 355. And you pull that piston back and engage the threads of the piston by turning the knob. Now this is a trick on the 355 PenBBS. Only engage a couple of those threads until you can grab that piston. Don't turn it real tight. I've just turned a couple of threads, and there. I've pushed on this, and it's grabbed the piston and pushed it down the barrel. Now I've got control of the barrel. I can stick my nib in the ink all the way up to the filler hole, which is right there, up just right where it touches the section, down into the ink, and push down. I should get bubbles in the ink as it pushes air through, and then I pull it up like a syringe, and it will fill the barrel. Again, if you're brave and you have a cloth you put around that, you can turn it upside down again, let the air rise, and push it out. This is not dissimilar to what you do with a syringe. Pardon me, I've hit my mic. So I filled this syringe, and it's got part water, and part air. And if you push this back up again, you're pushing the air out, and at some point, it's going to squirt out the top, just like that. Same thing with this. If I ink to about here, and I turn it up this way, and there's a gap of air, I can push that plunger up until the ink gets to about the bottom. You'll have to watch because ink will gush out of here when you've got it turned up. And then put it back in ink and pull up the remainder, and you'll get more ink. Of course, this takes a ton of ink, so you've got to want to have a lot of ink in your pen to be able to risk getting ink all over your fingers like that. Of course, both pens, when you're writing with them, have this shut off. Let's first of all get the 355 back into position, because that's not how you, this is how it ends up when it's full of ink. You give it a pull and it clicks, and then you turn the piston knob to disengage those threads, and leaving your nib in the ink, push that plunger back down again because it will displace some ink. And then you can close that off, get your Kleenex out, clean off the nib, and you're ready to write. While you're writing with either of these pens and the cap is locked tight, that piston on both of these pens locks to the bottom of the section, the bottom of where the feed and the section touch, and it basically locks any ink from getting into the section. So you've only got ink in the section while you're writing. At some point while you're writing, that ink will run out, and to get more ink down into the section, you can just release that cap, just like that, and it disengages. It's easier to see on the 456. Now there's a space between that plunger and the bottom of the section, and ink can flow from the chamber into the section. I tend to like to write with it like that because you don't want to have to keep filling the section up with ink. But the advantage of that is that when you're done writing, you can turn it up. I even wiggle this a little bit on my 456 and get the ink out of that section, close up the cap. Now that's locked and there's very little ink in there, and you can take this pen on an aircraft with you, and you won't get any burping of that ink into the cap, or you won't get any exploding in your shirt because it is sealed. The same thing with the 355. You have the cap open. It allows the ink to flow between the nib and the section while you're writing. Turn it back up again when you're done. I always give this a little bit of a wiggle. You can actually pull that out a little bit, and it allows the ink to drain. Close that cap up, and you're good to go on your aircraft. So let's take a look at how to fill each one of these pens with some ink. Okay, let's fill up the 456 first. I'm going to fill it up with some Iroshizuku Kon-Peki, one of my favorite inks. So, disengage cap, pull the piston back, and we're going to, this inkwell has a really nice little divot in the bottom of it that your nib can go into to get it as deep as you want. I'm doing about half full in this bottle, and you push the plunger down. You should get some bubbles in your ink, and then the ink flows up. Now again, this is how much ink that I got into my fill. Now, if I pull that back again, all the way to the bottom, and then submerge the nib in ink and do a second plunge, I should get a better fill. There we go. That's not bad. Close up that cap and this cap. And we're ready to write. Let's see about the 355. I'm going to fill the 355 with some Lamy Turquoise. There we go. Open the blind cap. Pull the piston back. I'm just going to turn it just so it doesn't go all the way in, just so I can get control of that piston. There we go. So now I can push that down, submerge the section into the ink. This has a nice little divot in the bottom of it as well. With the syringe filler, or the bulk filler, I like to go a little bit slower so that the ink follows the piston rather than pulling it all the way up and letting it bubble. Then you get bubbles in your ink. That's a pretty good fill. I don't think I need to do it a second time. It's also fairly dangerous, but if you wanted to do a second, you'd push up on this rod until that ink rose to about there and then do it again. I'm not lucky enough, even when I'm not on camera, to be able to do that without making a mess. Now, what you have to do here is disengage the threads by turning that the opposite way to what you tightened it. And then you're going to push that rod back down through the ink. That's going to make ink come out of that feeder hole right there. So I'm going to put it down into the ink or above the ink to be able to pull that. You can see I've disengaged. Well, you can see that that's now disengaged from the piston. And yep, a couple of drops, quite a few drops of ink came out. So make sure that you're over your inkwell when you do that. And close up the ink. And we're ready to write. Good fill. What are some of the pros and cons of these pens? Well, they both write about the same. So it all comes down to a couple of things that are major differences. That's the filling system and the fact that they don't cap the same. Sorry, they don't post the same. The 456 posts securely. It's a little bit long and back weights the pen a little bit, but at least you can keep track of your cap when you need to. However, the 355 is very, very long. It doesn't post as securely. It's almost impossible to write with it when it's posted like that. So that's one drawback for the 355. The other thing is the filling system. And so this filling system on the 355 is a little bit more complicated, Once you get the hang of it, it is really quite easy to do, as you just saw me do. This filling system is, in terms of complication, not very complicated at all. Push it down, you got to fill, close it up. But when you're cleaning things out, this pen is a little bit more difficult to clean in terms of just pushing water through it. Whereas this one, because it's like a syringe, you pump that piston back and forth with the nib in the water, and it's clean in almost 2 seconds. So this one's a lot easier to clean out. They're both about the same complication to take apart. So if you want to take apart the pen and clean them, it's about the same. They're both beautiful fountain pens. I love writing with them both. But it comes down to convenience and what you like in terms of the shape of the pen. And that's all I've got to say about the 456 and the 355. I love them both. I thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. And click on that bell so that you get a notification whenever I come up with another pen-related video, good or bad. Thank you for watching. That's all she wrote.